Hello again, Ian Stick with Mastermind Games. Going back to Malifaux for this one with Pandora. So Pandora is a Neverborn, Fairskin 09047. The words. She is an inhuman creature and has chosen only to look human, essentially descended from the original residents of Malifaux. And many characters in Malifaux are based off other characters in literature, pop culture, and in her case, it is the Greek tragic heroine of the same name who opened a box and released all the evils that exist into the world. And she does have her own little box. She is insane and has difficulty differentiating between herself and the box, doesn't even remember where she got it from. And when opening it, releases spirits called woes, which she herself is, essentially embodiments of one misfortune or another. And I have no idea how she's going to end up in 3rd edition, since everything is, while out, is kind of rare since the first printing sold out, so there is a 2nd printing being done, so we'll get it eventually, but in earlier editions she turned her enemies' abilities against them. Okay, it's one I saw it, so... Let's see. Hair next. I'm gonna go with Blood Red 09003 to start with. He's been fairly consistently shown with red hair, and that'd be a nice counter to some of the other colors I'm going to give her. But another aspect, and this is going to affect the color scheme, is in 1st edition, Neverborn were consistently described as having an odd translucent skin, even those that were taking human form, as a tell sign. And they've kind of dropped that in more recent editions, but I'm going back to that for this, or I'm going to try to at any rate. And I'm also going to work another urban legend in to her, and we'll see where we end up. So just like Hamlin the Plague, this is kind of experimental. So just get a nice solid coat. She's got a fairly simple color scheme. So 2 colors for her outfit, skin, hair, box. The basing is that custom sculpted thing I do, so it's going to be a uniform gray. And many Neverborn seem to have some kind of subtle shape-shifting ability. Or, well, some kind of shape-shifting ability. Many are more subtle. But those who have taken human form do so to operate more openly in Malifaux. I think that's dry enough on the hands. I can start on the box. So let's do that with Shield Brown 09161. I don't need a whole lot of this. Just a little dot. It's a nice hot day already, and the day's barely begun, so paint will dry very quickly. With any luck, I can get through 3, or if I'm really lucky, even 4 videos today. Especially since the next one after her is going to be a very simple color scheme. Okay. A little more. I think that's too much paint on this end here, just to put in a bit more, and let that dry before moving on. Okay, the hair is still drying, but I can move on. Dark Elf Skin 09164. So this is going to end up pretty close to the concept art's official color scheme, at least for 2nd edition. But you know what, I paint them how I feel like it, and this is how I feel like painting Pandora. Now Another aspect of Pandora is she is in a coven with Zoraida the Swamp Hag and Lilith, Mother of Monsters, both Neverborn, though Zoraida is dual faction. And in that regard, it's a traditional witches' coven with the members representing the maiden or a young woman, the matron or mature woman in the prime of her life, and the crone or the aged wizened woman, and Pandora would represent the maiden, Lilith the matron, and Zoraida the crone. At least I think I'm remembering how that goes right. It's been a while. But she has been one of the major players for a long time and was one of the original Neverborn masters alongside Zoraida and Lilith, so. Okay. I'll go ahead and do the prep work for the lighting effect coming out of the box. So, matte white, this is an Army Painter Warpaint, and a replacement for the pure white that ran out in my last video, and this is leaking. This is flowing nice. Alright. So I'm just going to prep this mist and the glow coming from the box. Okay, that's not too bad. So once that dries, I can get the rest of the dress and do the basing and get ready for shading and lighting already. Alright, all that's dried up enough, so leaf green 09011. Okay, so with base coats like this, you want to keep your brush moist but not overly wet. Then with your highlights, you will want to, shading, sorry, that's the next step. You'll want to thin out your paint with usually 1 part paint to 1 part water. And with highlights, you will use a dry brushing technique and no water at all, just straight paint. And I'll show exactly what you need to do with that when I get there. Just being cautious right here. Because I do not want to nick the hair, the skin, or even the black I painted earlier. Well, dark gray, dark blue gray to be completely fair, but okay. And Pandora's whole thing in general is just spreading misery. Doesn't particularly explain why, that's just her thing. There's a piece right there that's fighting me. And she isn't actually insane. Just kind of, again, unstable, unable to differentiate between herself and the box she carries at times. Even thinking she was always the box and the physical body is not much of anything, which, given the way Malifaux works, might actually be true. It's entirely possible that her flesh is just some sort of host body and she really is the box. But that's just one possibility with, quite frankly, no evidence whatsoever, just something that popped in my head. And there's the green. So now, where is it? Yeah, uniform gray. There's another war paint. Another army painter war paint. Excuse me. Get a better feel for this brand, but it does have a different consistency than the Reaper Master Series I've been using for so long. Change is again kind of a necessity based on what is available locally, and no one's carrying the Reaper anymore. The paints, though, are at least similar enough to them that there's few problems with getting the two to mesh. Okay. Match base coats. Once that's dry, I can start shading. Yeah, just a little more of the green right there on the right. Okay. Okay, time to shade. Give us a chance to focus. If it'll play nice with me at any rate. There we go, kind of. I'm going to start with the box actually in Woodstain Brown 09160. I'm going to thin out with about generally 1 part paint to 1 part water. And typically you're going to, on base coats, you're going to work from the lowest area, generally the skin, to the highest. Shading is going to go high to low and highlight low to high again. So being careful to avoid the white I did earlier. Stab that on, and that got onto the green and the black skin, so soak that up. And then the hair, 09002 deep red. This one is about out, so I've got a replacement on hand. Yeah, this is definitely going to be the last time. Nope, maybe not. There's a little more in here than I thought, but it is still running pretty thin, so. Now, one thing I cut out is the drying times, and that's going to be very much affected by the environment you're working in. In hotter and drier environments, it'll dry more swiftly, but in more humid or colder environments, it'll dry more slowly. So just bear that in mind, that humidity and temperature of your surroundings do matter, at least in terms of that. And then, yeah, I really need to let that dry before moving on, so back in a bit. Okay, next, Pine Green 09010. I'll only be able to do one at a time for a bit here. Another trick to working with shading is to you want to keep your brush wet and keep the paint wet, but use as little as possible, keep as little as possible on your brush, if that makes sense. I'm going to start with the most difficult area, the collar near her neck. Just being patient and meticulous here. Go ahead and get the front and sides here before I get the flowing skirt down the back. Being especially careful where it comes close to the skin. Loosen up a bit here now. Again, keep my brush wet. Letting the paint just flow wherever it wants to go, for the most part anyway. If it gets spillover, you can use the brush to absorb it, or a paper towel, which you want to keep on hand for the highlighting anyway, as well as thinning out the amount of paint and water in your brush. Okay. Lighting effect's going to be done last, so let that dry. Okay, things are dry enough I can work with it. So, Dark Elf Shadow 09163. You need to be particularly cautious about that so not to hit the skin. I'll go ahead and do the lighting effect with a little pale green 09012. And with the lighting effects, you'll want to thin it out with 2 to 3 parts water per 1 part paint. Same thing for particularly dark colors like straight black. And the key is to have some of the white showing through, preferably in internal areas. And that'll do. So once that's dry, I can do the skin and the base and move on to highlights and details. Okay, next up, so this is where I'm experimenting. Instead of the usual shader, I'm using Ghost White 09063. And it's dry and hot enough today that that last layer of shading only needed about 10 minutes to dry. If it's particularly humid or cold, it can take an hour or more. So, here's the experimental part. We'll see what this looks like, and that's flowing all over the place. We'll see what this looks like when I hit the highlights. And then, where did I put it? Stormy Gray 09088. And my my paints are falling all over the place off camera. And just filling in the base, letting it go in all the cracks. This is just hand sculpted, a layer of sculpting putty in the recessed area of the base with a quick pattern carved into it. In this case, it's just a simple grid for the carefully laid stonework you might see in downtown Malifaux, where all the rich, affluent people live until they run out of money. A little more right there, because I blew it again. All right. I'm just going to do, and we'll see how this coupled with what else I'm going to do, end up working out. So, back in a minute. Okay, highlight and detail time. Pure Black 09037. So the other urban legend I'm putting into the model here is just the dead black eyes associated with aliens and demons and other paranormal, paranatural creatures. Doing this essentially as a base coat, taking a tiny brush and just carefully filling in. And now I'm going to start with the box for highlights. So, Driftwood Brown 09162. So for dry brushing, first off, no water, just straight paint. Second, you need a ragged feathered brush, kind of like this one here. And you're going to rub most of the paint out on a paper towel until it looks like there's nothing left. Then just lightly dust the area to be affected, making sure you're going against raised edges. Fair Highlights 09048. Now we'll see how this experiment pans out with the skin tone. I'm hearing some noises coming from my computer I don't like, so I'm going to take a look. Okay. So Fair Highlights. Not too bad. Definitely a porcelain complexion. Unnatural. And since that is what I was going for, great. Dark Elf Highlight 09165. So I'm swapping brushes pretty freely here because I can, since I have several on hand that are just right for this. So you do want your brush completely dry. So just bear that in mind while painting. Zero 09012 pale green. I can get away with a larger brush for this. I'm focusing on the most readily visible surfaces. Going against any obvious ridges. I'll do a bit of the underside here. And then Fire Red 09004. And being careful around the face. The hair is pretty solid, so I don't have to worry about it snapping off like I've had to on some other Malifaux models. And now Misty Gray 09090. It's a little too big. Let's see here. Need the right brush for the job. That'll work. Okay, now taking pure black again. Oh, good gravy. Well, once again, my computer has decided to have a temper tantrum and dropped about 1,200 frames over the course of 10 seconds or so. So, frustrating. Pure black 09037. Switching to a flat head brush. Most brushes I use are round heads. That'll do you good for most tasks in painting, so, or at least miniatures painting anyway. These are good for large areas. Well, large, relatively flat areas. I'm just lining the base. I used to do a faction-specific color for each model, but drop that with the faction change when the faction changes to Malifaux were announced. So I probably won't repaint anything. Always clean your brushes out thoroughly between use. Just keep a cup of water on handy, but be careful not to take a drink out of it by mistake. And there's Pandora, ready to unleash unholy terror on the citizens of Malifaux. Going to continue with her box set, No Shelter, in the next video. Until then, I am Ian Stuckey with Mastermind Games, signing out.